Well, I think with Saudi, Becky, they're really trying to walk a tightrope. They're essentially trying to finally balance things here and keep everybody appeased. And so on one hand, at the moment, production is really strong. Actually, there's talk of it getting up to about 11 million barrels a day at the moment, which is an absolute record. And we see that affirmed in our export data as well. We're seeing November finishing out at a record. And so at the moment, production is strong. But on the flip side of that, they're trying to rein in flows to the US to try and keep those inventories in check and buoy prices a little bit. And then we've got the OPEC meeting coming up at the end of next week when they're going to be looking to have a cut coming through. So really there's these opposing factors at play here where they're trying to appease President Trump, but at the same time as well, they want a cut, they want a higher price than where we are now.
Old saying is that the solution or the cure for low prices is low prices, because right now you also have drillers in the United States, North American drillers, who are looking at this and saying, how much money are we going to spend to pump out oil next year? They're setting their budgets for next year. And based on WTI sitting at $50 a barrel, you can bet that there's going to be less money going into that than there would have been just a month ago.
Absolutely, Becky. Another thing to consider as well is that there is that WTI benchmark, but there's also the WTI Midland benchmark, which is specific to Permian Basin, where the majority of this production growth is coming through from. And prices there are considerably lower than WTI. They're like $6 lower a barrel, something like that. So it isn't just that sort of 51 that we're looking at here, it's 45, and perhaps even lower than that at other regional price points. And so, yes, even though we may be seeing lower gasoline prices, we're also seeing these producers going to really get hurt as well, it would seem.
Well, the production, we're just looking at the supply on that level of things. How much of this do you think is supply, and how much of it do you think is demand, slowing demand happening around the globe?
One of the things that we look at, Becky, on a macro basis is oil in transit, oil that is on the water at any one given time. And we see that at extremely elevated levels. And that isn't because of demand. We think that is because there's this availability, not only increasing flows from Latin America and West Africa, but also from the Middle East as well. So there is an influx, a surplus of supply at the moment when there's just this lack of demand from a seasonal basis. And so really it's a bit of both, but really there is this surplus of supply, and that's really why we've dropped this sort of 30% in the last nearly 2 months here.
Matt, that's interesting, because I thought when you set it up by saying you were looking at the amount of supply that was on the oceans at any point, I would think that would be somewhat an indicator of demand, that people are actually there to be buyers on the other side of it. You're saying that's not the case.
It can be viewed in one of two ways, but we're also seeing a lot of product on the water as well. And another thing we see is floating storage building up. And so that is an indicator that there just isn't a market for this oil or these products to go to. So that's a real concern from our perspective. But yeah, you're right. In some cases, when you look at this, it could be viewed as bullish. But in this case, because of everything else that we know, it really signals a bearish case here.
We have seen oil prices come down so far, so fast. You're telling me you still wouldn't be a buyer at these prices?
Well, I think going into the OPEC meeting here, we're going to see a bit of a bounce. You know, Saudi and with Russia as well, trying to push for a cut here. And so I think we should be seeing prices leveling off around this level. But as I mentioned, if we see the supply continuing to come to market here, then by all means we could see prices even tick lower from here, especially if the economic news continues to worsen as well. What
would you bet by the end of the year? What are we looking at for this last month of the year?
Oh, yeah. But potentially just getting up to over 60 again for WTI, should these cuts be signaled that they are going to happen. If we don't really get anything out of OPEC, then we could see them moving lower towards the lower 50s.